Final Fantasy II, the game the world wanted and didn't quite get. And I do mean 2, by the way, not 4. It isn't Cecil's time. Yet, anyway. For anyone confused by that distinction, you'll learn the error of your ways shortly. For anyone confused by the concept of Final Fantasy, well, boy howdy do I have a video for you. It should be the very first one in this playlist, and it should be linked on screen right here. Go on. Go learn. We'll be here when you get back. I used to be one of the plebeians that didn't get Final Fantasy II and its sadomasochistic take on leveling mechanics and storytelling, but I am now practiced in the art of falling in and out of love with this game that suffers from flying too close to the sun.
This video contains spoilers in the form of frank discussions of the plot of Final Fantasy II, as well as its predecessor, and examples from other entries in the series.
If you want to get it caught up, it'll take you some time, so I'd start sooner rather than later. Even if I can admit to liking, even enjoying parts of the plot, the characters, and the Final Fantasy of it all, I can't say I'm sold on all of the gameplay elements of the second entry point in the series. Now I know, and we'll discuss this, that 2's gameplay mechanics formulated the basis for another game's leveling system. Saga. But this is not a video in a series about Saga, riddled with far more controversy, if you can call it that. And release issues result in 2 being an overlooked and underplayed practice in patience and love. Now, before we get into the nit and grit that is Final Fantasy II, or Final Fantasy Origins, or Final Fantasy Shadow over Palakia, or whatever you want to call it in order to not confuse our delicate American minds, I wanted to take a moment to go over some of the notes I received on my last video. Except, I feel something taking over me. But I refuse to take notes. Thank you. Oh yeah. Alright. I guess carrying on. God, could you imagine if it was still this blurry? Yeah, no. That's better. No, but I did want to take a moment to just say how stoked I am at all of the interesting and thoughtful responses in the comment section. I appreciate every fun little fact and people sharing their favorite Final Fantasies. Anyway, back to me. With so much to discuss and no need for a re-explanation of the goals of this series, play all the games, put them on a tier list, the rest is just stuff I made up. Let's get right into the weeds. With just under a year turnaround time, Final Fantasy II was done impressively by December 1988 for a Japanese family computer release. A larger team and shuffling of staff, as well as the intention to not reuse any story elements from the first in the series, results in a story all of its own. And from the plot pacing issues, it isn't surprising to learn that the story was done prior to much of the game's development. While situational misfortune resulted in some of the game being developed stateside, we wouldn't receive a copy of what would become known as Final Fantasy II as an American audience for another 15 years. 12 after the release of Final Fantasy I and the subsequent release of Final Fantasy IV, known regionally as II in 1991. Confused? Don't be. That is quite literally the opposite of what they wanted. You see, if you got 4 right after 1, you'd have questions, right? So they just called 4 2 and went about their day, doing the business equivalent of taking an entire plate of lunch and sweeping it under the rug, hoping no one will ask any questions when they're invited over for dinner. For the lot of you who said the last video was perfect because you won't be ruminating on your third 80-hour playthrough of Final Fantasy II, unlike us sickos in the fandom, this plot synopsis is for you. Arise, another set of orphans. Kind of just like normal teens? As we start in media res of the proposed takeover and relentless hunt for power hoisted on the world by the foul Emperor Mateus. And while his name is never spoken in-game, trust me, it's Mateus. The rebel forces are making a stand, but not particularly well. Having been pushed out of Fynn to their new seat of power in Altair, we're left to assume that the massacre in the town where the 4 main characters grew up was merciless, and their parents... well... The princess managed to save 3 of our 4 heroes after a brutal beatdown as they fled their homes. Leon... well... Firion wakes in the care of Princess Hilda, who denies the boys' pleas to join the rebel forces and kind of rudely insists they go back home to the destroyed town she just saved them from. We're also introduced to the court's white mage. Instead of allowing the kids to stay and learn more of the rebels' strategies and structures, she teaches them the rebel call and introduces the player to the concept of the memory mechanic, and lets him and his besties Maria and Guy off the healing hook to go look for your lost party member, and Maria's brother, Leon, who the princess hints may still be in Fynn. Okay, so the opening act of this story is a little more dense than the first one in the series prepared us to expect. And there's no easy way to break up our summary like there was in 1 with the handy-dandy crystal counter. so I will be thinning out the weight a little bit by immediately taking a detour to talk about the memory system. I have mixed feelings about this system, the same way I have mixed feelings for just about everything this game has to offer. Within the next few scenes, we're going to be shown exactly how this mechanic works, and how it can be used both for and against our characters. We learn the phrase Wild Rose, and can ask other characters for more information once they complete their dialogue. Within the first few towns, using this key phrase will start fights and unlock plot. Conceptually really cool, right? You as a player have to differentiate when and where you can say certain things. Except there are only a handful of examples across the entirety of the game in which the system functions as anything more than a, hey, make sure you're talking to NPCs mechanic. I love having to talk to NPCs. Whether it's to understand the vibes of the town, or get a gauge of the living atmosphere of the world, or even just to point you in the direction of plot when you as a player or character don't know where you're going or why. But in this instance, some story beats and plot arcs are locked behind returning to every named character after you get another learned word. It creates a bulky mechanic that never quite achieves what it demonstrates over the course of the next few scenes. Or really does anything except make me despise the color red and the word learn. Since most of the time, you simply turn around to extract more information from the exact same NPC who taught you the dang word in the first place. Like, sorry my ignorant friend doesn't know what the word mask means, but you've really confused me. Do you want to share more information, or is that the end of the conversation? Anyway, airships fly overhead as you try to get your bearings and lay of the land. On your way to Fynn, you can stop in the cheery, not yet war-torn town of Gutreya, where you can use the meager funds you and your orphan friends scraped off the body of fiends to stock up. Or learn what you have to of the rebel bartender still caught up in Fynn, who may know about your missing compatriot. Upon arriving in Fynn, you find it teeming with Imperial guards, all of which will fight you in the street if you get up the nerve to confront them. Revealing yourself as aligned rebels, which the children's willingness to do adds credence to Hilda's concerns about their participation in the cause, will lead the bartender to tell you about the wounded soldier he's hidden behind the walls in the tavern, and then decides in that moment he's had enough, and fully bails. Thank God no one wanted a refill in those intervening 10 minutes as you descend the secret stairs to find the wounded Prince Scott, or else the next few scenes would have played out quite a bit differently. We find out that Scott is the future king of Kashan, and Fynn to boot if Hilda returned his infatuations in kind. Instead of being able to help him with any of the healing potions you find in this very room, he gives you his ring, a message of hope for his own little brother, and then promptly dies. Presumably from tripping over a rug, or a cold, or shock, or something. Oh well. At this point, I care for him about as much as I do for Leon. But Scott at least gets a second chance at our hearts in hell. We'll get there. I have a grievance. And now, this is not a main camera gripe, just quickly. There are about 5 false walls in Final Fantasy II. And in my opinion, that is either 10 too few, or 5 too many. Trust me, I'm fine with it when it becomes more of a staple, a mechanic. And don't worry, they do eventually commit, so you'll hear all about it. But right now, in 2, it just kind of feels like an excuse to make me explore a vast and empty world, as I will now be using my personal time to press my character's sprite against every wall worldwide. Anyway, no word on Leon, whoever he is, but following your footsteps back to Altair will get you something much more important. A 4th party member. Minwu decides we've proven ourselves, but are also much in need of protection out in the great wide world. So the best white mage that the series has seen thus far decides to tag in. And as is the power of apparently all great seers and mystics in the Final Fantasy universe, Minwu grants you the use of his canoe. Hilda offers us a job and our first clue to her grand scheme, which involves the harvesting of mithril, a mythical metal, to combat the Empire, who is using the same materials. I don't know how much rock, paper, scissors Her Highness has played, but I don't know how to tell her this is a mediocre idea at best. Before heading out, make sure you let Hilda info dump at you about the Empire's plan to use slave labor to build a weapon of mass destruction, otherwise known as an airship with guns. Also known as the Dreadnought. Instead of objecting, the 3 teens and the princess's bosom buddy wander off to Salamand, on the hunt for metal by means of the extensive world-building pirate town of Plume, which ushers you almost immediately across the waves to Puft. The canonical first Cid, who wasn't somehow absent from the original release of the first game because he was out getting milk. He was out getting milk in 1987. He's from where you're from, but you wouldn't know him because you're actual children. But that's besides the point. He's since given up the art of war to follow his dreams of operating an air taxi out of Poft to bed, baths, and beyond. And by that, I mean you and your party should 100% go directly to Salamand and nowhere else to get started on the Queen's mining task. The Snowy Sanctuary is home to Joseph, his daughter Nellie, and a woman whose name we'll never learn that hangs outside of his house, in the snow, reeking of simp behavior.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it.
I guess, discouraged baby mama behavior? Unclear. Needing proof of our good intentions, you know, the group composed of one of the highest ranking people in Hilda's court and a bunch of kids, Joseph asks us to save his townsfolk who are being held in captivity to do forced labor in Summit Falls. Joseph fails to bring up that his aforementioned daughter, Nellie, was captured by the enemy army captain Borgin, for some reason or another. She doesn't look particularly handy at crafting war machines, but maybe they just needed teeny tiny hands to finish all the detail work. And Paul's there! You remember Paul? Paul from Altair, the cool thief? Paul? Come on! You remember Paul? Paul guides all the townsfolk back for you, so you can complete the dungeon, fight one dude guarding the Empire's entire prized mithril store, take said mithril, and bounce. Ignoring this odd blue stone at the beginning of the dungeon, that isn't for you. In what will be a pattern and would feel more like harassment if she didn't insist on giving all of the rebels orders personally, report back to Princess Hilda with the mithril. She'll point you in the direction of Tabul, the town's fabled blacksmith, who comes out of retirement for one last job. The chance to give a bunch of teens swords. Now she'll specify that your next task does rest in Basque, with the intention of destroying the Dreadnought. We also learn that the Dark Knight, who there's no chance we know, because he's only recently joined the Empire's army, left to deal with the theft of the mithril and the Empire's reappraisal of the rebellion. Just kidding. After milling your way through this 2-level scene masquerading as a dungeon, the Dark Knight corners you to tell you that you're too late and to give up before hustling away. And Borgin, who was previously too busy pushing his labor force to finish the work, shows up to rub it in your face that they've finished in the nick of time. And to celebrate, they commit a bit of countrywide genocide. Just as a treat. With no clues as to the rebels' grand plan, our brave heroes go back to the princess to ask what's next in their quest log, only to find her distraught at the ailing health of her father. Minwu stays behind to attempt to aid the king. Sid didn't seem to want to let slip how to destroy the Dreadnought prior to now. I assume, as he and the princess cross their fingers and toes, that the people they didn't trust yesterday would pull through and finish the fight before massive war crimes were unleashed upon the countryside. In the face of catastrophe, he opens up that the everlasting flame held in the fallen Kashan keep should do the trick. But in order to unleash the flame in question, you need a bell to break the seal, keeping the sunfire safe. The sun flame is apparently a really cool thing that dropped to the planet for a really cool reason, but wars ruined the whole place, so I don't think it really matters all that much. Where is the goddess bell, you might ask? Well, the king, aka the keeper of really cryptic passed-down royal rumors, doesn't have a clue. The princess points you vaguely north and back to our homie Joseph, who tells you to go back to Summit Falls to get his super secret snowcraft. Why'd he leave it there? Dunno. Why is it the only sled in the entire world? Dunno. At least he has the decency to join your party as you retrace your steps. Did you guess that this story-locked key item was hidden behind that blue stone that you could totally interact with prior to this moment? Well, good for you. Because for whatever reason we didn't grab it the first time. Maybe there was a super secret locking mechanism on the cave wall that we couldn't figure out without Grandpops tagging along. You successfully head out of the falls and can traverse the only area with snow on the entire map, and the fabled first home of the concept that would become Moogles, who were busy out getting milk in 1988 and couldn't make their debut. Welcome to the Snow Caverns, also known as the third, if you're being generous, dungeon, that I personally didn't reach until about a quarter of the way through my gameplay. Oh, don't worry, the pacing on the dungeons doesn't stay like this for long. We just have to crawl through the rest of the plot first. So, after retrieving the bell with honestly very little interference, except, important side note, Guy can speak Beaver. They tell you where to find the bell. Do we know why the boy can speak Beaver? Was he raised by beavers? Why beavers? No one knows. We will never know, and we will not care. This is the beginning and end of Guy's plot. 10 out of 10. Borgin again shows up at the end of your efforts, but this time snubbed, as it seems the rebels and the Empire are operating in a bit of a similar playing field after somehow surviving aerial bombardment. Taking his failing standing with the Emperor into account, the emphatic Borgin commits to taking you out, by whatever means necessary. After defeating him pretty handily, he reveals he's booby-trapped the cave, which seems a little redundant if you thought there was any chance he could have stopped us. Like, bud, that was time in which you could have hand-delivered the bell to the Emperor. Instead, he promises to meet you in hell and drops an indie-style boulder down the stairs after you, which can only be stopped by the force of a single human body, to which the only person here with a dependent lays down his life to save our triumphant heroes? Return to Nellie to find she's under the care of the strange woman who was previously outside, that the house seemingly adopted, who may or may not already be her mother, and deliver the news that Joseph will not be returning. If only the continuation of plot wasn't incidental, I would say maybe the princess is learning a thing or two about strategy and attempting to keep a step ahead of the Empire. Except this is the first time in a long line of events that we didn't need direct monarchy over... Oh. And there's Gordon. Finally done pouting about his lack of courage to come do something about the end of the world. After confirming he doesn't really know much more or can do much more than our heroes, the kingdom's most average man joins the team. Bringing up Gordon's twos across the board feels like a perfect excuse to talk about the leveling mechanic, or the thing that causes the most fervent feelings in both crowds of 2 players. This system would serve as the base for Akitoshi Kawazu's next endeavor as lead developer at Square, Saga, which in a fun naming convention is called Final Fantasy Legend overseas. Now, I won't pretend to be well-versed in Saga or its gameplay mechanics. Don't judge me. I got into video games relatively late and didn't have a lot of summers without gainful employment to no-life every JRPG that caught my interest. It's what this channel is for. So, expect a Saga review sometime in 2037. But I swear to God, if any of you nerds actually me in the comments, I won't be looking at Romancing Saga or your comment twice. The core of the experience system is this. Every point you gain is based on your character's actions, and depending on the version you play, every point you lose is based on your character's inactions. For this video, I played the Pixel remaster of Final Fantasy II, which has since removed the punishing mechanic of lowering your stats should you fail to swing a sword or spend enough mana within a battle. I've phrased this as taking the teeth out of the mechanic. The game still has bite, and you can still feel the unique pull of this leveling system, without needing to grind later because you forgot that your evasion was directly tied to whether or not you brought a shield to the party. Note to developers, shields, which usually increase a defensive character statistic, do not seamlessly translate to evasion. No part of my brain would assume that walking into a fight with 2 shields and no weapons would accomplish anything, let alone assume it would be the best way to boost a stat that is not only important, but also increases your likelihood of leveling agility. Am I saying hoping your character avoids attacks is the only way that you should be able to level evasion? No. In what universe of straw men did you pull that from? What I am saying is unintuitive. -1 billion out of 10. It is an interesting take on leveling, and takes an approach that, for the characters introduced, I think works really well in this instance, and wouldn't have in many of the follow-ups. As you progress, your heroes learn any of the skills placed before them. None of them start as magic users, but are all capable of learning magic as long as you, the player, are willing to grind the levels of intelligence, spirit, and MP necessary to make them good at it. And instead of limiting which characters have access to which weapons, you can mold any of your 3 companions into any shape you'd like. Warrior Maria? Sure. Archer Guy? Why not? Red Mage Furion? Hard to say no. Where this loses me is the versatility getting in the way of diversifying. By allowing all of your characters access to the same spell pool and weapons, you're asking the player to create and mold the perfect job and stat line for each character. And this is only muddied by providing a rotating cast of 4th party members, all with diverse skills that need to be slotted into the party. There will also be more to speak on with the jobs and leveling mechanics as Square finds its feet balancing storytelling and player choice over the next few years in titles. Another small nitpick is the optimize button. It is absolutely a waste of your time. If you click the button, it doesn't look at your character's statistics or what you had previously equipped them with. Instead, it just takes the weapon with the best stats, meaning your fighter could walk into the next battle with a healing rod for all you know. Tangent over. Back to plot. So, Taco Bell's cheesy gordito crunch drags you around his old haunts, leading you to the ceremonial torch and sunflame in question. Walking outside reveals a cutscene of an airship, presumably Sid's, being chased by, presumably the Dreadnought, captured and carried away to the west?
Huh?
Then turn your asses around and head right back to Altair. Tired of hearing it? Yeah, well, we're tired of seeing it. It and its non-interactable wells. But we do get a special treat this time. If you travel a little south of the keep, you'll see the unmistakable glow of the Chocobo Forest. Right when you thought the loss of the airship and the freedom of fast-ish travel across the map to the Rebels' busiest bus stop was going to destroy your enjoyment of the game, they win your hearts with an even cuter, more free-range, random encounter free mount, and the very first appearance of the series' staple bird horses. Here you return to the princess, or more accurately, an empty seat and worried courtsman, who tell you she was captured on Cid's airship coming to help you, but brought somewhere north of Altair. The best part? It was because she was worried about us. The kids she sent into abandoned ally territory to find the only thing standing between her people and absolute destruction. And she was the one that got. Go figure. Now go north. North. More north. So north that you're kinda south? You know, in that same way the real globe Earth works. Try not to get too turned around here because you'll know it when you see it. Can't miss it. Hopefully you've learned how to lie to the cops since your first excursion to Finn, and board the ship without problem, showing them a pass that totally belongs to you. Or you can do what I did, and shout out that you're rebels, smash the captain to bits, and board the boat anyway. Walk around this really large ship. I mean, it has so much extra space, I guess, to hold more guys, or more guns. More hellbeasts? Emperor only knows. Find Cid and Hilda in the belly of the beast, where Cid, the tactical genius that he is, suggests that he and the princess run to the airship and hope you kids make it back in time from dropping a bomb in the engine. Hilda doesn't seem too perturbed by this plan, but maybe she'll realize how dangerous it is and run back aboard in a bit. Run around a stupid dank man maze to reach a big glowy pit in the moving machine room, where you are again confronted by a person you definitely don't know. Maria, We don't. It's Leon. He's 100% the Dark Knight. And while that brings up cool implications for the plot and the world at large and the melancholy of the story or whatever, I don't care. He sucks. We'll get there. He's gone now. The Batman can't hurt you. You return to Altair again, where the king expels his long-winded last requests. For Gordon to lead, for Minwoo to break the seal of the ultimate magic that can only be unleashed when the world is on the brink of destruction. We didn't think it would have worked a whole blitz ago, my dude. And he wants Furion to go to Deist, home of the Dragoons, who he's pretty sure are all dead, but likes wasting your time about as much as his daughter does. Maria and Guy are there too, and Hilda's being strange. Whatever. We all deal with grief in different ways. This is a great stopping point to talk about the Ultima controversy since we've just been made party to it. This is such a fun one, and one of the very first examples of Square's often joked about disdain for the fan base. This is of course a joke. We know you love us just as much as we love you, or else you wouldn't take our complaints as hard as you do. In the NES and Famicom releases of 2, Ultima, the greatest spell of our times, was, well, shit. It didn't work as intended and was incredibly weak, making the last segments of the game, spoilers, where you have to follow in Minwoo's footsteps to unlock the spell to save the day, feel incredibly wasteful of your time. To this day, most fans assume the spell not working as intended was a bug. There was no way that the plot-ending spell and the first series appearance of Ultima would be this worthless. It is claimed, rumored even, that upon testing the game, Sakaguchi found this bug and demanded it fixed. But the programmer responsible apparently wanted the lore to reflect that sometimes the tools and powers of old were drastically disappointing and could not be relied upon to be the key to future successes, not only refusing to fix it, but coding it in such a way to make it unfixable by anyone but himself. Quite the tale if you ask me, and the validity of any of it is hard to confirm outside of fan pages, message boards, and passed along screenshots. That isn't where the mystique around the spell ends, as there's apparently a version of the game script in which Minwoo unlocks the door unburdened, and you and the party are supposed to use Ultima as the killing blow against the Emperor. Unless you get the spell early, its 100 damage for 1 MP cost is laughable, and the only way to maximize Ultima's damage is by maxing out all of your character's other skills, meaning the spell can do anywhere from 600 to... Reportedly, if you think I did this math myself, I would be just as likely to get it wrong. Over 9,000 damage. Fun, right? Okay, back to it. Meet a mysterious stranger on the shores of Paloom who offers you safe passage to Deist. Too good to be true, Maria. First with this Leon business, now with... Oh. Okay, yeah. Maybe it was. After promptly showing Layla the pirate the error of her ways by beating up all of her friends, we convince her to join our party. And she does. Abiding by pirate law, she allows us the use of her ship, opening up the first other meaningful mode of transportation we've seen all game, and giving us another companion. Having just gotten a boat, you would probably assume that Deist is the only part of the map completely surrounded by water and inaccessible up until this point. Inside of the island's castle, you'll find a mother and son grieving the passing of the last dragoon and the boy's father, as well as the last wyvern who lay in the next room dying. You must find the fabled dragoon Drip that will let you speak with them. Go through the Deist caves to find the necklace to talk to the dragon who tells you that you need to put their egg in the spring at the bottom of the caves.
Okay, sure.
As we wrap up yet another subplot, you must be thinking, Ramuh's beard. There can't possibly be more of this plot. And you'd be right. We're on the fast track to being done with the discussion of the core plot decisions. Are we almost at the end of the game? No. Can we take a break to talk about any of the game mechanics, or the themes, or the ramifications on the series? No. Now finish your vegetables before you get any dessert. By now, I should be choreographing my feelings about this game to you in the same way that Maria keeps hinting that one of the villains might be her brother. Obviously. Once you do that, it's back to Altair, where Hilda... Well, Hilda, this is a child, and... Oh, yep, you're a sexy snake lady.
Damn you, you evil, sexy snake ladies.
And we find out the princess was somehow captured at some point between the Dreadnought and now, and is being used as the prize for a tournament being held in Palamecia. Sounds...
like a trap, but I'll bite, I guess.
Gordon comes along, leaving the pirate in charge of the armed forces of his kingdom. And I guess the kingdom at large, since no one of a higher standing is around? Look, maybe someone will come up with a plan one of these days, but this is as fine a plan as anything else anyone has come up with so far. Plus, his willingness to trust Paul shouldn't make this handover all that surprising. You guys remember Paul? The thief?
I am so tired.
Ah! Jump scare.
These vegetables actually kind of suck, so a sampling of dessert is called for.
I'd like to go on another little tangent about something that makes this game unbearable long term. And since I wrote the video, I get to do whatever I want. 2 words. Monster closets. 5 words. Tiny rooms filled with monsters. More words. Time waster with no benefit, in which you open doors, see literally nothing, but the incredibly high spawn rate means a random encounter waits for you as you about face and head for the way out. Explore, they said. It'll be fun, they said. They forgot about the hellbeasties taking up oxygen since Mateus let them out of their cage. And trust me, they're doing just fine.
And I can already hear the retort. Oh, well, just don't interact with them. No can do, buckaroo. If you're 100% a holic like I am, every once in a while, there are chests behind these doors. And even if you're not, let's say you're on a second playthrough and it just doesn't matter, well, I hope you remember which one of these demon doors hides the way towards plot, because not once, but thrice, you have to go through these random encounter generators to find the next story beat.
Super fun mechanic. At least they learn and we don't see the monster closets again, at least not in their truest form. Get to the Emperor's kitted out Colosseum. It's almost like we should have known this guy was bad news. Who personally wishes you good luck before setting Behemoth on you. Who's the only other competent...
Oh, it was a trap the whole time. Who could have seen that coming?
He throws us in a cell, but Paul... Hey, you guys remember Paul? It's Prison Break Paul! Love you, buddy. He gets us out. And if only he stayed, because the second Gordon can run off with the princess, he does. And in the time it takes for us to walk back to the castle, the 2 runaway rebels have apparently come up with a plan. And that plan is to take the fight to them. Because Because...
Find Gordon and Hilda in the field battle-ready camp, preparing to take back Castle Finn. Dubbed fitting assassins by our good friend, not prepared to die for his country, Gordon, the group pushes into the castle to find and kill the Castellan. And Leia's already inside waiting, because halfway through this game, you finally found a good fourth set of hands that only leaves when she knows her shoes can be filled.
Gordon?
I've seen a lot of traps in my day, and just letting us walk in doesn't seem like whatever. We reinstate our monarchs.
You couldn't have possibly thought that was it, could you? You can see the time left on this video, and that's not all element discussion and tier listing, homie. We have miles to go before we sleep, and by miles I mean 6-ish dungeons, so let's speed this up.
Hilda's worried about Minwoo, who never returned from his journey. But before you go, make sure you find one half of a set of masks required to break the seal to the Ultima tome that the king knew about but didn't send with Minwoo.
No wonder he isn't back yet.
Apparently, Paul might know where it is, or you can happen to press your body into the top right section of the throne room and find the door without leaving said room. Now leave said room, and after a mini basement dungeon, follow Minwoo's trail to Mysidia, where a bookshelf vomits the rest of the world building exposition and a few riddles at you before you go downstairs to the town's statue chamber. A must among cultural centers the world over, I'm sure, to place the first white mask on the statue goddess's face. Then you must turn towards where the black mask in the set resides.
The back half of the game feels quite a bit closer to the first in the series, as you gather more and more vague clues pointing you towards random objects scattered throughout the world.
From a tropical island in the middle of the sea, you receive the black mask, seemingly appropriated from the island's masked native populace. Then return to Mysidia, where they tell you the crystal rods lie somewhere on this continent. Thank God we've ruled out Deist.
And going back to the tropical island.
Once you find the Mysidia Caves, which I feel like the mages should have just told me it was across the mountain range. I really don't know why everyone is being so unhelpful. Especially if the Black Mask trial, where you place a mask on a nega version of yourself, is to prove the purity of your heart. You guys already have failsafes in place. Why did no one write this down? With the weight of our sins figured, we grab the crystal rods and head over to the Mysidia Tower.
Very clever naming convention mages have. You know, the spell trees make a lot more sense when their lack of creativity is acknowledged.
Don't get your hopes too high that we're rounding that last bend, as Leviathan creates a tide pool and sucks you up in his first canonical series appearance. Whether we see his face is irrelevant, as we get very acquainted with his innards. He defo might need some acid relief, probably from eating one too many of his favorite snacks, crystal rods, and we come upon the town that has formed inside of him. Assuming Layla died in the crash, we befriend Rickard Highwind, the actual Last Dragoon.
Sorry, Philip, the second to last Dragoon isn't as cool of a title.
As we travel through the Mysidian Tower looking for Minwoo, who... Oh? The body count keeps growing as our old pal unleashes his... spirit beam? His... soul... juice? A cool white laser to destroy the seal leading to the Ultima tome at the expense of his own life, giving us access to a spell he would be much better at using.
Now you're probably thinking, that's a lot of rotational party members. Surely we've met them all and we can talk about your issues with the system. Nope. We're still missing one. And I bet you can't guess who.
Return to Finn.
It doesn't revitalize the run and tell the princess mechanic just because you've moved her to a different castle.
Here you find out a cyclone of all things has breached the shores and is sure to kill everyone if you three randos who reinstated a useless monarchy don't do anything about it. On the suggestion that you grow wings, you may think to return to Deist. This is the wrong choice. Well, unless you're still dragging Rickard along, as you can discover more sad facts about the widow Elena, and hear Mr. Highwind adopt her son, Cain. We'll return to this naming convention some other time. Just remember him.
He'll be back.
Or will he? But taking the time to get to know some NPC's sob story banks you a sick-ass sword, and you can leave knowing you have more than a 50% chance of re-orphaning that poor kid. Anyway, what you were supposed to do is go to the mysterious mirror within the castle's walls and show it your cool dragon necklace, so it can dump Speedy Grow in the life spring and decant that bad boy early, so we can fly headfirst into the stormy hand of the Emperor and face off against, well, the Emperor, who we beat. End of game?
At least you don't have to walk back to Finn this time, they just gracefully land you there. Watch a cute dance scene where Layla apparently chooses not to dance with anyone. The player's ponderance of where Guy and Rickard are quickly quieted as a soldier barges in to announce that the Dark Knight, Leon of all people, has announced himself Emperor. Which I do guess is kinda how the rise to power thing is done. It's just a little silly is all. Granted, if anyone's going to do it, it's gonna be a teenage boy that's narrowly avoided death more times than he can count. Then the soldier dies. Shock? Cold? Arrow holes? Who knows? And where do the royals send you when they have no useful information? Good old Paul. Why we couldn't instate him to power is beyond me. Turns out he's been caring for an ailing Cid who uses his dying breath to bequeath you his airship so you can fight Leon. With a measly 2 dungeons left, you unlock the airship. Free reign of the map, baby?
Sure.
Not that it would do you much good. Even prior to losing a few towns and nations, the overworld map was already not super populous. A small issue, sure, but then why is there so much of it? A quick chat with Leon reveals he's been living on the wrong side of history for about a week too long, and has taken a quick liking to fascism. The fun thing about this is that he is just as quickly disillusioned when things don't quite work out for him.
I'd say that louder for the people in the back, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be listening anyway.
The Emperor shows up to set Leon's delusional ass straight, and yep, there Rickard goes, nobly sacrificing himself.
Damn shame my bingo card didn't line up better.
Report back to the princess, who demands to know why a traitor is at her doorstep, to which you beg her to let him join your nation state? You really aren't rebels anymore, even if Hilda insists on calling you that still, so I guess you're begging her to let him join the Royal Standing Army? And here he is, our final party member, which means we can finally go over to the character corner and discuss my gripes with the system and the story at large, and hopefully prove that a little bit of character shuffling could solve a lot of my issues with this game. And don't worry, there isn't a whole lot of game left to discuss. But Ramuh's beard, do I need the excuse? I mean it, I have 1 paragraph of synopsis left, but I gotta. Welcome to the character corner. When a game's so bad, you gotta sit on the ground. Welcome to the 4th corner, or the one that makes a square. I thought it was about time we had a more grounded conversation about one of the mechanics in this game, so I chose for it to be about the 4th rotational party slot, filled by one of these 6 mostly enjoyable characters. I think the game does this not only to open up more of the world, to allow the player to ingratiate themselves to more characters and their stories in a way that 1 did not allow for, and also to help you swallow the bitter pill of having to tote around 3 inexperienced teenagers looking for a single crumb of hope in the face of a great war. I mean, in our canonical first fight, we get the shit kicked out of us by these guys. These teeny, tiny little guys. So we get a 4th party member. Our very first 4th party member is Minwu, or the highly respected, highly leveled white mage and personal court healer for Hilda, our high and powerful princess. Now, all storytelling convention would seem to point to the fact that we would get Minwu much, much later in the game. He's one of the most defined 4th party members that we receive over the whole course of the game. I mean it. Look, Joseph has proficiency for unarmed attacks, but he's an old war veteran who has taken far more to civilian life than he did to war. Or Layla. She is stated to be an active pirate, but she has the stat block to encourage a player to give her a little bit of black magic should they have the tomes kicking around. She also has an interesting amount of weapon proficiency. Weapon proficiency is often sort of overlooked by the player base, mostly because it isn't that important. The proficiencies don't do enough of a difference to make it a highlight of the system. In fact, I think encouraging the player to use Minwu very early in the game negates teaching the player about weapon proficiencies basically at all. meaning you'll most likely just be using higher powered weapons and negating the minimal addition that their proficiencies grant them. Then again, with the grind in early games so necessary, to receive the level 16 cap on any of your skills means that swapping weapons around for a lot of your main cast members is not a great idea anyway. While I do think both of those options, Joseph or Layla, would have made for great additional party members right off the jump, I think the most obvious option is right in front of us. He starts in the same town that you do, he's just as scared. Damn right I'm talking about Gordon. I think he would have been a great fourth party member to start with. He has flat skills, which means that you as a player can shape him however you want. You also get him in your party more often than not throughout the rest of the story, meaning you can sort of choose what direction you want to grow him, and that can be changed by the developers as the story continues. But the fact that he has a flat scoreline means they can either push it down lower to grant him to the player earlier, or they can leave all of his 22s so that the player gets more of an understanding that the world is a scary place, and someone even as powerful and as politically motivated as Gordon would have very real fears. I did forget to mention this, but I think one of the smartest reasons to give Gordon early is that he can get waylaid in Gutreya. So one, he doesn't have to confront his own brother while he passes away, but two, so that the player can get more comfortable with the feeling of giving up fourth party members. I think that's not something super well established, especially early on with Minwoo being in your party for so long. So, neither here nor there, but I really do think that they should have turned around a party member a little bit earlier just to get you a little bit more comfy. Does it? But that's not my real script doctor opinion. That's just if we're leaving the plot exactly as it is, which I don't think you should do. I think the smartest thing for this game would be starting the player in Semet Falls, either as one of the laborers in the force that's been kidnapped, or somebody familiar with Joseph so that when he points you towards the caves, there's no need to gain his trust. Rather, you can start with him as a companion, or, in my opinion, the best companion to start the journey would be Leon, allowing the player to get some acquaintance with his character and who he is as a person before the game completely annihilates his likability by making him a bad guy. Not only would starting the character in Semet Falls allow you to already have that pre-perceived trust with Joseph when you come back with Hilda's quest, but it would allow for the player to gain a little bit more insight into the world at large and the war at hand. Pushing from small town to small town may more quickly teach the player a little bit of hesitancy with who you speak to, where you go, and the consequences of your actions as you explore the Emperor's new paradise? Regardless, it would also help to push off that feeling of constantly playing leapfrog to get to and from different locations and just having to go back to Altair. Leapfrog was the wrong word, but that's fine. Also, I think it would be helpful to spread out the 2 mask dungeons. We start the search for Ultima much earlier in the game, allowing the character to talk to various people who have heard rumors or tell of this great magic. Not necessarily that you'd want to go looking for it this early, but that it is a possibility that it's there. And then we wouldn't be looking at this breakneck, back-to-back dungeon crawler that we hit about 3/4 of the way through the game. Do I think this would be perfect? No, of course not. I don't write games for a living, but I do write essays, so grain of salt. Back to the final push through 2 last dungeons. We learn there's the Jade Passage, or a very real doorway to the very real hell that you have to traverse to get to Pandemonium, or the Castle of Hell, where traveling up the 10 floors would have been a great time to use 7, but hey, we're not all about symbolism here. Gets you to the final fight. And outside of the Emperor having sold his soul for power, there isn't some great plot shift that needs to be explained. Just a floating douche who needs to be buried apparently deeper in the ground than 6 feet, which if you have the right weapons equipped, shouldn't take you too long. I won't leave you guys out of the loop. It is, in this version, the missable Bloodsword that does a non-negotiable 1/16 of the enemy's HP per hit. So it's most effective when you're fighting Mr. Big Bad over here. They snap you right back to the castle and tell you it's over for real this time. Not like the last time. Or the time before that. And I'm sure nothing in this great kingdom of Fynn will ever go wrong again, with its strong leadership of a handful of young adults, recuperating after a long and hard-fought war. So let's dissect the plot. There's a lot more meat to chew through and some much more obvious themes and tones. There are no mystical heroes of old, no one destined to save the day. Instead, we face the first completely man-made villain of the franchise. A man sickened in his search for ultimate power. While I would not necessarily call the rise of Mateus a fascistic grasp for power, his one-note militaristic movement towards the protection of the power of Palamecia over all else make it a fitting comparison. There's even the scapegoating of the Dragoons as a strong antithetical force to their cause that is later refocused on the rebel movement, used as an excuse to mercilessly bomb all life on the planet outside of their charming desert home. Religion can also be brought up to draw comparisons, as the Emperor ties himself quite literally to the powers of hell. The religious implications aren't super secure though, so I wouldn't quite call it a point. But cronyism is well and truly front and center in the Empire's structure, in which the power of labor is destroyed, and the only way to attain power is through your value to the man in charge, shown most blatantly through the captains, Borgin, and Leon's turn from and back to the grace of the right side. This game hard focuses the corrupting force of the hunger for power and imperial greed. Emperor Mateus is so thirsty for more bodacious landmass that he unleashes hell beasts on the world. He bombs a majority of the towns and outlying civilizations, not because they stood against him, but in order to prove his strength to those who might. One could approach Mateus's plot and view the holes. Having the understanding of sanity to realize he could have focused his sights on the rebellion, squashing them, and then turning his willpower to win over the hearts and minds of those newly unruled people. But at the beginning of the game, I believe we're supposed to assume he's already been corrupted by his mad search for power and control. I also think it's incredibly important that the villains in this game are as vile and almost comically evil as they're depicted, because one of the deeper messages here is that while war may be told from the perspective of its victors, everyone is brought down in the face of desperation and violence. Most of our goals as a party are to destroy natural environments, to take naturally occurring resources in the pursuit of war. We fight mostly mindless beasts and animals. We don't rescue the laborers for their own sake, but to stop the Empire's mad march towards military supremacy. We take old treasures from cultures that are not our own and leave a trail of bodies, some with more utility and responsibility to the cause than those that live to fight another day. There has to be a reason that the rebels are caught on the back foot, even with a standing army. And it is my belief that while this world is clearly much like our own, segregated along the lines of nations and monarchies, filled with dangerous militaristic cultures and bands, the peace that precedes this conflict seems to have been long enough that the world grew complacent. We don't know much about the world prior to the war. We don't know how corrupt the royalty were, what religious forces were at play, if the people in the towns were happy and cared for and fulfilled. But regardless of this lack of context, we can still ride the waves of emotion that the story sets before us and understand the true impacts of conflict. Children are made to be the weapons of war and turned into heroes and leaders, or die trying. It is a beautiful story, but a sad one that strays a little too far from fantasy for comfort. Leon. We are gonna have to talk about Leon, but I think I'm gonna leave that to the end of the video to better reflect the game. So, if you couldn't already tell from the art style, or you forgot I said it earlier, I played the pixel remaster of Final Fantasy II for this video, and just like last time, I think we need to take a look at all of the iterations of the game to see what has come and gone to get us to this point. Outside of strange fixes to complement American sentiments, mostly adhering to not hurting our fifis around religion or gender, there have been a multitude of localizations and changes made over the course of decades. So let's talk about some of the benefits of the most recent version of this title. And with such large changes made, like the wild ride we see the leveling system take. Please forgive me if I don't give ample time to the brackets around keywords or character name highlights, and any other minutia and UI fixes we see over the course of the next few decades. We see some of the first game's quality of life upgrades repeated in this re-release as well. Auto-targeting and auto-battle gets introduced, quick saves and overworld saves, the mini-map, world map, and total chests per location tracker were added, as well as some more serious and life-altering changes like increasing inventory space, and introducing the ability to use items in your inventory during battles. These upgrades, along with price reduction, bulk purchasing, and item stacking, make this game more playable by far. And with every evolving version of the game, the music and graphics were updated in order to show off the game and gaming systems, capabilities, and capacities. And just like in 1, an art book and bestiary would be included in the menu for perusal. We've already talked about some of the changes made to the battle system over time, but there are some truly strange turns that I will be reading out in the order in which they happened. I don't care if any of them are technically out of order, and neither should you. I just don't want you to die of stress at an early age. Looking out for ya, bud. And I will just be reading these off. It's a long list. Weapons no longer impeded magical accuracy. Stat values no longer decreased after a battle. HP increased statistically after 10 battles your hero survived. XP needed to level skills changed to a growth model, requiring more for higher level gain. Increased stat effect for casting magic. Equipment bonuses become stackable. Guest party members receive buffs to their HP, MP, and unique skills. Non-adjustable difficulty modes were added, starting the player on easy. Encounter rates in some areas were lowered. Skill points for progression lowered again, but only slightly. Progression was reverted to previous values, but level caps per encounter are removed. You can change a character's row both in and out of battle to take less damage from enemies. Prerequisite easy mode is removed. Asuna is debuffed. Fear is debuffed. Poison is buffed. Bomb enemies can self-destruct whenever. Enemy encounter rates rebalanced back to unbelievably often. Weapons with abilities become reusable, and characters can unarm attack while holding 2 shields. Why would you do that? To be able to raise evasion and still win a fight. Look, I said this game was masochistic, not a deal with the devil. Unless... All of that to say, we end up with a bit of an unbalanced, still wildly difficult in some senses, but nowhere near the original as far as aggressive difficulty spikes and weary skill balancing mess of adventure and regret. This isn't to say you don't feel the difficulty spikes as they arise. There are still several dungeons in which you can grind outside for a couple of hours, pop a tent and hope for the best, and still land yourself in an early grave. Fortunately for me, the Pixel Remaster has a quick load that will start you from the beginning of a floor inside of a dungeon instead of at your last save. So my unfortunate gripe with this lady and her pack of cats has since been forgiven. We do unfortunately lose some of the dungeons we found along the way. We see a similar loss of these elements in 1 as well as some of the other Pixel Remastered games. But I do think, in 2's case, it is the biggest loss. I remember reaching the end of 2 for the first time and waking up in hell with a group of party members that, in my opinion, is much cooler than those you get in the main game, and being stoked that there was additional content that was a little bit more self-contained. In my first not-as-completionist playthrough, I didn't interface with the Arcane Labyrinth, but I wish I had. So much so that I did, just not before filming. So you know, do what you love and whatnot. And unlike in the first one, we even lose the transportational minigame, in which you have to memorize and match character portraits. And while I personally love a memorize match game, I really don't think we need a time waster with this little connective tissue. Unlike 1, whose plot elements would be revisited much later, 2 saw the release of a companion novelization, as well as the appearance of some of its characters in linked games in this series and others, which would be the start of a long line of IP nightmares and fun fan theories. Once we reach the end of this era of games, probably after 3 or 4, I would love to go back and do a shorter video regarding all of the additional materials surrounding these games. So unless you guys want a deeper dive into anything in particular, like Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origins, all of that may very well be included. So let me know down in the comment section below so I can start researching niche materials online. Now, on to the only question in this entire video that actually matters. How does it rank? Well, let's give ourselves a quick recap on the totally official and 100% scientifically based metrics we supposed for the last video, huh? Level progression, music, plot, and use of tropes. While we could spend hours talking about the battle mechanics, I don't think there's enough that effectively falls outside of level progression, so the metrics remain unchanged. For now. Oh, what, you really thought I was going to swap up the award-winning slideshow? I've got a lot to say and a lack of energy to pretend that I'm not reading off of my monitor. Level progression. Let's be 100% real here. It is a punishing mess. Super cool in concept, but struggling to reach level cap, especially if those caps are tied to an in-game spellcasting mechanic, is rough. In theory, it's really cool to think that your characters are completely shaped by your collective actions, that who they become rests in how they carry themselves on this journey. But the mixed messaging of providing hard-to-level, predefined fourth party members, who the player is more likely to equip with statistically superior main party hand-me-down weapons than anything they're uniquely proficient in, makes the whole affair feel a bit hollow. The dungeons can be suddenly and intensely punishing, even if the surrounding area or last dungeon was a breeze. You very rarely feel adequately prepared in 2 the way you could in 1. I understand that it is a product of the story, in the same way that 1 has a habit of making you guess as to whether or not it's worth chasing an encounter or fleeing, and weighing the cost of potions against the need for XP. You're meant to feel a little powerless, that war is in fact an endless struggle, and every battle is a hard-fought victory. But I feel like it doesn't have the same balance. A big complaint for me with the first game was the struggle to equip your mages. In the world of 2, spell tomes practically tumble from every nook and cranny, and gil fills your pockets faster than you can spend it at a certain point as you race through dungeon after dungeon. Again, you can chalk this up to the rebel status throughout the game, how much more secure your nation becomes, how much support you have, your progress. Unfortunately, that doesn't make it any more fun to play. The only reason this isn't getting the game an F is because they have since removed the punishing stat deduction system, which proves that the game could have been worse, and they chose not to break out all the stops to make this a truly punishing experience. It gets a D. Gang, good news.
We're still good!
It still slaps. Unfortunate news, that won't help the final scores. Yet, anyway. If you want to come hang out while we do a track tier list for this game, and the last, you guessed it, come hang out on Twitch while we listen to some tunes and talk about them for way too long. We'll be dissecting the first 3 soundtracks as well as the Pixel Remastered versions. Depending on the sum of all of the tracks, we may even retroactively change the game's ranking. So, it gets a soft S. For now. Plot. Here is where things heat up a bit. Unlike our last game, this one has named characters, a motivated villain, and tons of effective character arcs. The map even changes to reflect story beats. What starts really strongly with immediate action and character motivation quickly becomes running back and forth across the map. I love, well, most of the characters. We have experienced real eventful deaths of characters that have annoyed and enriched our last 40 or so hour experience. There's an effective, crushing environment of melancholy and impending doom that doesn't hurt your hero's resolve, but strengthens it. You get to watch as 3 children learn what resilience and strength mean when facing overwhelming odds that are very against your favor. Our intentions and ambitions are felt. Even if I'd much rather see the reign of Paul, the first of his name, than either of those brain-empty, well-intended Nepo babies who we reinstate. Unfortunately, this is where we have to talk about Leon. This man... I feel like he perfectly encapsulates my issues and joys within the game, and the hard story it is trying to tell. We don't get to play as Leon for the core push of our party's story, outside of the first scripted encounter and the last 2 dungeons. He's a huge plot mover and shaker, and yet I could not care less about him. I'm more enwrapped in Alina and Kane's story, or that of Nellie and Joseph's nameless baby mama, that I'm curious about what Leon's motives are, or why Maria so desperately wants her brother back, because they are as obvious as they are boring. Every character has the stink of the times on them. Paul works with royalty because he understands how severe the risk to his country is. Gordon readily accepts aid from the outlaw Layla because she is the most experienced leader amongst them when he needs to go and save his much more capable girlfriend. Our leaders are incapable. Our heroes are teenagers. The story is clear. So what is Leon's role if not to play along with the party? He's meant to represent the reason someone like the Emperor could and would rise to power. The types of people who would follow him, and how easy it is to corrupt the minds of the youth with the uncapable promise of a better future if they can just prove themselves valuable to a system that has already failed them. He is the character that best encapsulates how wars can rip families apart by means of more than just death. How hard it can be to face those we love when it comes time to do what's right, and how blood and love are not always going to win an argument of passion, morality, or justice. And he's used to show that power will fail all but the one most endowed. How following a strong man who promises security if you just follow his every whim may very well bite you in the ass. But guys, he sucks. He isn't very good, and you don't have time to level him before the final fight. You spend more time picking his corpse off the floor than he does fighting. I also straight up don't care about him. I'm not Maria, so when her brother is revealed to have joined the wrong side with no outward signs of corruption or intent of coming back, should the tides turn, I'm ready to write him off as a bad person. And he kind of is. I mean, once the world is saved, he doesn't even apologize. He just up and disappears again. I wasted all this time to try and save his ass for him to just up and walk out on the people who allowed him the space to grow and come to terms with his actions. But that, in the end, is part of what makes us the good guys. We let him go, to possibly scheme his way into selling his own soul, but with the hopes that he'll return a better, more whole person. But this game has had too many poignant moments that reflect our own world for me to believe that that's what will happen. Maybe I'm the bad guy. But if it weren't for Leon, I think I could talk myself into loving this game, even for all of its flaws. So there are my thoughts. The developers and writers leaned into an epic, a tale of war and how that changes hearts and minds, which is a hard scale to balance, and in some respects is elegantly done, but in others, Along with critiques of plot come critiques of pacing, and I just cannot forgive the fact that the plot all but wraps up less than 3/4 of the way through the game. With more fake endings than Return of the King, the last 15 or so hours feel like its own war of attrition that could have been so easily avoided by switching around a few story beats. This is on top of a slow, uneasy start where a wrong turn on the overworld map can result in a party wipe if you aren't careful. The pacing is all over the place. Some portions of the game are so beat heavy it'll make your head turn, while some are so slow it's hard to keep your eyes open. And this may just be a me issue, but giving us transportation methods that only work in one spot, like the snowcraft, or giving us the airship right before the final turn of the game's plot, doesn't feel good. And it feels more like a plot locking mechanism than a meaningful way to interact with the world, like the transportation upgrades in 1 managed to do. So a score. You want me to give all this a score? Yeah, I guess that's why I'm here, and do not read me for filth, because I do like this game, and its messaging and plot, but there is so much more that could and will be accomplished. Moving and offensive. Very different from 1, but banks at the same score. A C. Finally, Final Fantasy building blocks. We see so many staples of the franchise finding their feet in 2, from chocobos to the prodigious line of orphans turned war heroes, as well as some of the first very heavy storylines, dealing with heavy topics such as the unchanging and corruptive power of war, while still underpinned with some very silly, light-hearted moments. Cid is here for real this time, and airships can be seen whizzing through the air within your first hour of gameplay. While there are no crystals, and we've yet to see our first cuddly, flying friends in the Moogles, the base of the franchise is finally very physically apparent here. But it is getting some points taken away from being more akin in some ways to another series you can quote this game being foundational for, Saga. That's right, Saga enjoyers, this game is losing points because you're happy. There are also a lot of other things besides the experience system that we will never see again, including the memory mechanic. Unfortunately, we will be forced into a few more games that feature guest party members that you cannot deny entry into your party, but not in my opinion as egregious as this one. Gonna get it splashed right there in the B tier, yet again. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. None of them will be receiving a higher score than this until we reach 4. And post 5, we will have to return to retroactively regrade these games in the light of what the games become. So, Final Fantasy II lands itself a C. I would not recommend this game to non-Final Fantasy enjoyers. In fact, even for the fans among us, I would be more likely to offer up a playthrough video than a personal playthrough. The VODs of my experience with this video's base material will be up on this channel shortly for those interested. But it is by no means a failure, just a bit of a time waster. It's a 4th grader's essay filled with filler words, but at least they read the book they're reporting on, and almost everything is spelled correctly. We'll see if their use of abbreviation, including ending it in LOLJK, sees them demoted in rankings in future videos as we talk about other games. And that's really not at all exhaustive on what I have to say about that. But it's pretty damn close. And just like last time, I'll leave you guys with this. I don't take notes, but I do love to hear what you guys are thinking. So let me know what your experiences, if any, are with Final Fantasy II, and whether or not you definitely think it should have gotten a lower overall score in the comment section below. Also, I wanted to take just a quick second to shout out my Twitch chat for being the nacho cheese dust on some of the glass shards that are moments in this game. If you similarly want to come and heckle, or support, or just hang out, come on over. We'd love to have you. Or you can just join the Discord linked in the description below. Anyway, see you in the next one.